You were never supposed to exist. You're the family mistake, and everyone knows it." Those were the exact words my mother said to me in front of 37 relatives at my grandmother's will reading. She said them with a smile, like she was commenting on the weather. The lawyer's pen stopped moving across the papers. The room went dead silent except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. And that's when I knew this wasn't just about an inheritance anymore. I'm Sarah Mitchell, 34. I work as a forensic accountant in Portland, Oregon. I spend my days following money trails and catching people who think they're too smart to get caught. I never thought I'd have to use those skills on my own family. But here's the thing about being called a mistake your whole life. It teaches you to pay attention to details. And when the will was read that day, there were details that didn't add up. Numbers that seemed wrong. Dates that made no sense. If you want to know what happened next, keep listening. To understand why that moment hit so hard, you need to know about my family. My mother, Linda, had this way of dividing us kids into categories. There was my older brother, Marcus, the golden child who could do no wrong. Then there was me, the accident that ruined her figure and her marriage plans. She never let me forget it either. When I was 8, I remember her telling her sister on the phone, Sarah was supposed to be a boy. We had everything planned for a boy. Instead, we got this. She said it while I was sitting right there, eating cereal at the kitchen table. Marcus got piano lessons, soccer camps, college funds. I got hand-me-downs from cousins and lectures about being grateful for what I had. When Marcus crashed his car senior year, Mom bought him a new one. When I needed glasses in middle school, she made me wait 6 months because they're expensive and you'll probably lose them anyway. But here's what my mother never understood about me. Being ignored taught me to be self-sufficient. While Marcus was getting bailed out of every mistake, I was learning to handle my own problems. I worked 3 jobs to pay for college. I studied accounting because I liked the certainty of numbers. They don't lie or play favorites. By the time I graduated, I was already working part-time at a forensic accounting firm. I had this talent for seeing patterns in financial records that other people missed. My boss, Janet, used to say I could spot a discrepancy from across the room. It's probably because I'd spent my whole life watching my mother's double standards. Marcus, meanwhile, bounced from job to job. Marketing, then sales, then some pyramid scheme thing that Mom insisted was entrepreneurial. Every time he failed, Mom would write him a check and tell everyone how creative and ambitious he was. The thing is, I stopped expecting fairness from my family years ago. I built my own life, bought my own house, saved my own money. I thought I was done caring about their approval. Then my grandmother died. Grandma Rose was the only person in my family who ever treated me like I mattered. She'd slip me $20 bills when Mom wasn't looking and tell me I was smart enough to do anything I wanted. When I graduated college, she was the only family member who came to the ceremony. But that wasn't even the worst part. Grandma Rose passed away on a Tuesday in March. Heart attack, quick and peaceful according to the doctors. I found out from a text message in the family group chat. Not even a phone call. The message just said, Rose passed this morning. Funeral arrangements, TBD. I drove the 4 hours to my hometown that same day. When I got to Mom's house, the driveway was full of cars. Inside, it was like a family reunion, except no one seemed particularly sad. Marcus was there with his wife, Jennifer, plus aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in years. Mom barely acknowledged me when I walked in. "Oh, Sarah's here," she announced to the room, like I was an unexpected delivery. I wasn't sure you'd make it. I'd driven 4 hours on the same day I found out. Of course I made it. The funeral was 3 days later. Standard service, nice flowers, lots of people talking about what a wonderful woman Grandma Rose was. I sat in the back because the front rows were reserved for immediate family, which apparently didn't include me. After the service, Mom stood up and made an announcement. Rose's attorney will be reading the will tomorrow at 2 o'clock at the law office downtown. All beneficiaries need to be present. That's when something didn't add up. See, Grandma Rose had always been private about money, but she'd hinted over the years that she'd left me something. Nothing huge. Maybe a few $1,000s or some jewelry. But the way Mom said all beneficiaries with this weird smile made my stomach twist. The next day, I showed up at the lawyer's office in my best black dress. The waiting room was packed with relatives, all dressed up like they were going to another funeral. Marcus was there in a new suit, checking his phone and looking bored. Mom wore her pearls and kept checking her lipstick in a compact mirror. The attorney, Mr. Davidson, was this elderly man with thick glasses who'd apparently handled Grandma Rose's affairs for 20 years. He had us all sit in his conference room around this massive oak table. The will was in a manila folder, thick with pages and legal tabs. "Before we begin," Mr. Davidson said, adjusting his glasses, "I want to note that Mrs. Rose specifically requested this be read aloud to all parties present. She was very clear about that instruction." Mom's smile got wider. That should have been my first warning. Mr. Davidson opened the folder and began reading in this formal, monotone voice. The will started with the standard legal language. Sound mind, last testament, all that. Then he got to the specific bequests. "To my grandson Marcus, I leave my house at 1247 Maple Street, along with all furnishings and personal effects contained therein." Marcus straightened up. The house was worth at least $300,000. "To my daughter Linda, I leave my investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $450,000. Mom actually clapped her hands together like a little girl. Then Mr. Davidson kept reading. Cousin after cousin got something. Aunt Patricia got the jewelry. Uncle Bob got the car. Even Jennifer, Marcus's wife, got Grandma's china set. I sat there listening to name after name, waiting for mine. The room felt smaller with each bequest. My hands were sweating in my lap. Finally, Mr. Davidson reached the end of the list. He looked up over his glasses and said, "That concludes the specific bequests." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Marcus spoke up. "What about Sarah?" Mr. Davidson flipped through the pages again, running his finger down the text. "I don't see Sarah Mitchell listed among the beneficiaries." That's when my mother turned to me with that smile I'd seen my whole life, the one that meant she was about to say something that would cut me in half. "You were never supposed to exist. You're the family mistake, and everyone knows it." The words hit me like a physical blow. 37 people staring at me, some looking shocked, others nodding like they'd been waiting for someone to finally say it out loud. "Rose knew that," Mom continued, her voice getting louder. "She knew you were the accident that ruined everything. Why would she leave anything to someone who was never meant to be here?" I felt my face burning. The grandfather clock in the corner kept ticking. Mr. Davidson was staring down at the papers like he wished he could disappear into them. Marcus cleared his throat. "Mom, that's what?" Mom snapped. "The truth? Sarah has always been jealous of what other people have instead of being grateful for what she's been given. Rose saw that too. I wanted to stand up and leave. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear through the floor. Instead, I heard my own voice, surprisingly steady. "Can I see the will?" Mr. Davidson looked confused. "I'm sorry?" "The will. Can I see the actual document?" Mom's smile faltered for just a second. "Why would you need to see it? You heard what it says." "I'd like to see it anyway." That's when I realized what this was really about. Mr. Davidson handed me the will, and I started reading while everyone watched. The document was dated 6 months ago, which seemed recent for someone Grandma Rose's age. But what really caught my attention were the witness signatures at the bottom. One witness was Mr. Davidson himself. The other was my mother. I looked up at Mom. "You witnessed Grandma's will?" Someone had to, she said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. Rose asked me to drive her to the lawyer's office. It was the least I could do. I kept reading. The language was formal and legal, but something felt off about the tone. Grandma Rose had been a retired English teacher. She wrote beautiful, flowing letters. This will was cold and clinical, nothing like her voice. But I couldn't prove anything sitting in that conference room with 37 relatives staring at me like I was causing a scene. So I thanked Mr. Davidson, stood up, and walked out. The family group chat started blowing up before I even made it to my car. Marcus. That was awkward. Mom, maybe you could have been gentler? Aunt Patricia. Some people just can't accept reality. Cousin Mike. Always knew Sarah was entitled. Jennifer. I feel bad, but Linda's not wrong. Sarah never really fit in with the family. Uncle Bob. Rose made her decision. We should respect that. Message after message, all agreeing that I was the problem, that I was selfish for questioning the will, that I should be grateful I'd been included in the reading at all. But here's the thing about being a forensic accountant. You learn to ignore the noise and focus on the facts. And the facts were bothering me. Fact 1. Grandma Rose had always told me I was special to her. She'd never given any indication that would change. Fact 2. The will was dated just 6 months ago, but Grandma had been in good health then. Why would she suddenly decide to write a new will? Fact 3. My mother was one of only 2 witnesses, which gave her significant influence over the process. I drove home to Portland that night, but I couldn't stop thinking about those witness signatures. In my line of work, I'd seen plenty of cases where family members manipulated elderly relatives into changing their wills. The pattern was always the same: isolation, influence, and documentation that looked legal but felt wrong. I wish I could say that was the end. The next morning, I called Mr. Davidson's office and asked if there were any previous versions of Grandma Rose's will on file. His secretary told me that client files were confidential, but if I was a potential beneficiary with legitimate concerns, I could file a formal request. That's when I started digging. I pulled Grandma Rose's financial records, the ones that were public anyway: property taxes, voter registration, court filings. What I found made my blood run cold. 3 years ago, Grandma Rose had filed a restraining order against someone. The court documents were sealed, but the case number was there. I called in a favor with a colleague who had access to legal databases. The restraining order was against my mother. According to the filing, Mom had been harassing and intimidating Grandma Rose about financial matters. There were documented incidents of Mom showing up unannounced, going through Grandma's mail, and pressuring her to update her estate planning. The restraining order had been dropped 6 months later, right around the time Grandma Rose suddenly decided to write a new will. But that wasn't even the worst part. I kept digging and found something that made me physically sick. For the past 2 years, someone had been writing checks from Grandma Rose's checking account to L. Mitchell, my mother's name. Small amounts at first, $50 or $100. But in the last 6 months, the amounts had gotten bigger. Much bigger. The final check, written just 2 weeks before Grandma died, was for $15,000. I stared at that bank statement for a long time, sitting in my home office with my cat purring on my lap. Everything started making sense. The new will, the public humiliation, the family group chat pile on. My mother hadn't just stolen my inheritance. She'd been stealing from Grandma Rose for years, and the will reading was designed to make sure no one would believe me if I tried to expose her. Then something didn't add up. If Mom was stealing from Grandma, why would she risk a public will reading? Why not just quietly distribute the assets and hope no one asked questions? Unless she needed witnesses. Unless she needed the whole family to see me get nothing, so they'd think any accusations I made were just sour grapes. I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew would tell me the truth. Aunt Patricia answered on the 3rd ring. She was Mom's younger sister, but she'd always been the more reasonable one. "Sarah, honey, I'm so sorry about yesterday. Your mother can be harsh sometimes. Patricia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did Grandma Rose ever mention changing her will? There was a long pause. Why are you asking? Because something doesn't feel right about this whole thing. Another pause. Then Patricia's voice got quieter. Can you come over? I don't want to talk about this on the phone. I drove back to my hometown that same day. Patricia lived in a small house about 10 minutes from where I grew up. When I got there, she was waiting on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. Your grandmother called me about 3 months ago, Patricia said without preamble. She was upset about something Linda had done. She wouldn't tell me exactly what, but she said she was thinking about changing her will. My heart started racing. What did she say exactly? She said Linda had been pressuring her to sign some papers, financial stuff. Rose didn't understand all of it, but she felt like Linda was trying to trick her into something. Did you tell anyone else about this? Patricia shook her head. Rose made me promise not to. She said she needed time to figure out what to do. Then a few weeks later, she called and said everything was fine, that she'd worked things out with Linda. But you didn't believe her? No, I didn't. Rose sounded different. Scared, maybe. But what could I do? She was an adult, and Linda is my sister. I pulled out my phone and showed Patricia the bank statements I'd printed. Look at these check amounts. Look at the dates. Patricia's face went white as she read. Oh my God. Linda was stealing from her. And when Grandma Rose figured it out, Mom convinced her to change the will to make it look legitimate. Then she made sure I'd be publicly humiliated so no one would believe me if I tried to challenge it. Patricia set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. What are you going to do? I'm going to Mom's house. I'm going to confront her with this evidence. And I'm going to give her one chance to make this right before I call the police. Sarah, be careful. If Linda did this, she's desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things. I drove to my mother's house as the sun was setting. Her car was in the driveway, and I could see the living room light on through the front window. I sat in my car for a few minutes, looking at the house where I'd grown up feeling like an outsider. Then I walked up to the front door and knocked. Mom opened the door wearing her bathrobe and slippers. When she saw me, her expression shifted from surprise to annoyance. What are you doing here, Sarah? I thought you'd gone back to Portland. We need to talk. About what? I held up the bank statements. About these. For just a moment, I saw fear flash across her face. Then the mask came back up. I don't know what you're talking about. Can I come in? She stepped aside reluctantly, and I walked into the living room where I'd been humiliated as a child 1,000 times. The same furniture, the same family photos on the mantle. All of Marcus, none of me. I sat down on the couch and spread the bank statements on the coffee table. $15,000, Mom. 2 weeks before Grandma died. Want to explain that? Mom sat down across from me, her hands folded in her lap. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, Rose asked me to help her with her finances. She was getting confused about money. Confused enough to write checks to you for 2 years? I was managing her expenses. She couldn't handle it anymore. Then why did she file a restraining order against you? That's when I realized what this was really about. Mom's face crumpled. Not with sadness, with rage. That ungrateful old woman, she hissed. I spent years taking care of her. Driving her to appointments, grocery shopping, cleaning her house. And what did I get for it? Nothing but complaints and accusations. So you decided to help yourself to her money. I deserved that money. I was the one doing everything for her while you were off in Portland playing with your calculator. Marcus was busy with his career. But me? I was stuck being the dutiful daughter, getting nothing in return. Except for $450,000 in her investment portfolio. Mom laughed bitterly. You think that's enough? Do you know how much I spent on her over the years? How much of my own money I used to keep her comfortable? I pulled out my phone and started recording. So you admit you took money from her account without permission? I took what I was owed. And you forced her to change her will? I didn't force anything. I explained to her how selfish you'd always been, how you never visited, never called. She came to her senses about leaving you anything, while you were stealing from her. Mom stood up abruptly. Get out of my house. Not until we figure out how you're going to pay back what you stole. I didn't steal anything. And even if I did, who's going to believe you? The whole family heard what Rose really thought about you yesterday. You're just a bitter, jealous woman who can't accept that nobody wanted her. I stood up too, slipping my phone back into my pocket. We'll see about that. The next morning, I called Janet, my boss at the forensic accounting firm. I explained the situation and asked if she could recommend an attorney who specialized in elder abuse cases. Sarah, she said, I've been doing this for 20 years. What you're describing is textbook financial elder abuse. You need to report this to the police and the district attorney's office immediately. She gave me the name of an attorney named David Chen who handled these kinds of cases. I called his office and got an appointment for that afternoon. David Chen was a soft-spoken man in his 40s who listened carefully as I laid out the evidence. The bank statements, the restraining order, the timeline of the will change, the recording of my mother's admission. This is a strong case, he said when I finished. But I need to warn you. Family financial abuse cases are emotionally devastating. Are you prepared for your family to turn against you completely? They already have. It could get worse. Your mother will likely claim you're lying, that you're trying to steal money you're not entitled to. Your brother and other relatives will have to choose sides. I thought about the family group chat, the will reading, 34 years of being treated like I didn't belong. What's the worst that could happen if I do nothing? Your mother keeps the money she stole, and she gets away with abusing an elderly woman who trusted her. Then we file the complaint. But that wasn't even the worst part. David Chen filed the complaint with the district attorney's office on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, the police had frozen all of Grandma Rose's accounts pending investigation. That's when my phone started ringing. Marcus called first. Sarah, what the hell did you do? Mom's accounts are frozen. She can't access any of Grandma's money. Good. That money was stolen. You're insane. You're trying to destroy our family because you're jealous. Then Aunt Patricia called. The police came to Linda's house this morning. She's been arrested. My mother had been charged with financial elder abuse, theft, and fraud. The bank records I'd found were just the beginning. Once the police started digging, they found 2 years' worth of forged checks, unauthorized withdrawals, and manipulated financial documents. But the real bombshell came when David Chen called me that evening. Sarah, you need to sit down for this. The police found something else. What? There's another will. A real one, dated 3 years ago. Your grandmother had hidden it in a safety deposit box your mother didn't know about. My hands started shaking. What does it say? You inherit everything. The house, the investments, the personal property. Everything except for small bequests to other family members. I sat down hard on my couch. I don't understand. Your grandmother never changed her mind about you. The will your mother had Mr. Davidson read was a forgery, a very good one, but a forgery nonetheless. Your mother had been planning this for months. How is that possible? She had access to your grandmother's personal papers, her signature, legal letterhead from previous documents. She probably used Mr. Davidson's office because she knew he was getting older and might not remember every detail of every will he'd handled. But Mr. Davidson witnessed the fake will. That's the thing, he didn't. We compared the signature on the witness line to samples of his handwriting. It's another forgery. Your mother forged his signature too. I felt like I was going to be sick. So the whole will reading was theater. Your mother wanted to humiliate you publicly, so that if you ever questioned anything, the family would think you were just being vindictive. But why would she risk it? Why not just quietly distribute the assets? Because she needed time. She'd been stealing from your grandmother for 2 years, and she knew eventually someone would notice. The fake will gave her legal cover. If anyone questioned the missing money, she could point to the will and say your grandmother had given her permission to manage the finances. I sat in my living room for a long time after that call, staring at the wall. My cat jumped up on my lap and started purring, like he knew I needed comfort. 34 years of being told I was unwanted. 34 years of believing I was the family mistake. And it was all a lie. That's when I realized what this was really about. The trial took 6 months. During that time, I didn't speak to most of my family. Marcus called once to tell me I was tearing the family apart over money. Jennifer sent me a text saying I was vindictive and cruel. The family group chat, which I'd left after the will reading, apparently spent months discussing what a terrible person I was. But Aunt Patricia stood by me. So did a few cousins who remembered how Grandma Rose had always talked about me with pride. And David Chen walked me through every step of the legal process, making sure I understood what was happening and why. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged will, the stolen money, the manipulated financial documents. Mom's attorney tried to argue that she'd been acting in Grandma Rose's best interests, but the restraining order and the hidden safety deposit box made that impossible to believe. In the end, my mother pled guilty to financial elder abuse and fraud. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution of over $200,000, the amount she'd stolen, plus interest and penalties. Marcus had to sell the house he'd inherited from the fake will to help pay the restitution. The investment portfolio that Mom was supposed to inherit went to paying her legal fees and the money she owed. Mr. Davidson, it turned out, had early-stage dementia. He'd been struggling to keep track of his cases for months, which is why he hadn't noticed the discrepancies in the will. He retired immediately after the investigation and turned over all his files to another attorney. The real will was probated 6 months after Grandma Rose's death. I inherited her house, her investments, and all her personal belongings. But more than that, I inherited the truth about how she really felt about me. I found a letter in her jewelry box, written in her careful teacher's handwriting. My dear Sarah, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and I hope you found this letter. I want you to know that you were never a mistake. You were the light of my life, the granddaughter who grew up strong and independent despite everything. Your mother has always been jealous of your strength, and I fear she may try to hurt you even after I'm gone. But you're smart enough and brave enough to handle whatever comes. I love you more than words can say. Grandma Rose. I cried for 3 hours after reading that letter. But that wasn't even the worst part. I still live in Portland, but now I also spend weekends at Grandma Rose's house. I've turned her sewing room into a home office where I work on freelance forensic accounting cases. The garden she loved is blooming again, and I've learned to make her famous apple pie from the recipe cards I found in her kitchen. Marcus and I don't speak anymore. He blames me for destroying the family, even though I was the one who was betrayed and stolen from. Jennifer blocked me on all social media. Most of my extended family still thinks I'm the villain in this story. But you know what? I'm okay with that. I learned something important through all of this. You can't make people love you, and you can't make them treat you fairly. But you can protect yourself. You can stand up for what's right. And you can refuse to accept being treated as less than you are. My mother gets out of prison next year. I don't plan to have any contact with her. I've built a life that doesn't include people who see me as a mistake or a problem to be managed. The house is quiet now, filled with Grandma Rose's books and quilts, and the smell of the lavender she planted by the front porch. Sometimes I sit in her reading chair and imagine what she'd think about how everything turned out. I think she'd be proud that I didn't back down, that I followed the evidence and demanded the truth, even when it was hard, that I learned to value myself enough to fight for what was right. Being called the family mistake taught me something valuable. Sometimes the people who reject you are doing you a favor. Sometimes being unwanted by the wrong people means you're exactly who you're supposed to be. If you've been through something like this, if you've been the scapegoat or the outsider in your own family, tell me in the comments, what would you have done? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself? And remember, you're not a mistake. You never were.